Hi everyone, Dr. Kim here for another edition of Brainwave Wednesday. The last couple of times we've been talking about head injuries, and I want to continue on that again today. Got my notes here to refer to. So head injuries are often called traumatic brain injuries or concussions, and really that's sort of a continuum based on how significant or severe the injury is. Today I'm going to talk about misconceptions. I'm going to talk about the types or what causes a head injury, and then the biology of what's happening inside the brain. And the next time we'll talk about symptoms, we'll talk about prevention, and we'll talk about recovery. So, misconceptions. One major misconception is you might hear the term, well, it's a mild traumatic brain injury or a mild concussion. And really, that's a bit of a misnomer because it leads you to believe that there will be no lasting injury or damage, and that simply is not the case. Another misconception is that if you haven't gone unconscious, it can't possibly be a concussion. And I want to show you a picture of this is a famous case that you'll see in almost every brain book that you read of Phineas Gage, who was a railway worker in the 1800s. And what he did was, and they were trying to level, obviously to put some tracks on, so his job was to put gunpowder down into the earth to blast the rocks and tamp it down with a rod. And the story goes that he didn't put sand in for some reason, and the gunpowder ignited, and the rod went shooting, shot right up through his left cheek and out the top of his head. And the interesting thing was, he didn't go unconscious. He was awake and talking the entire time. So the rod went shooting, he was awake. So you don't have to go unconscious in order to have a head injury. Another misconception is people will say, well, it just takes time to heal. Yes, that's true, but it doesn't take like that long, extended. You don't want to wait for an extended period of time without attending to it in some other way, because most adults will have a relief of symptoms within 2 weeks, and most children and youth within 4 weeks. So you don't want it to go on longer than that without getting some attention. So what causes a head injury? Well, there's two main ways. One is an impact. So like Phineas Gage, an impact, impacting the brain, the rod going through the brain. Could be also something like a soccer ball hitting the head. Maybe you trip and fall and you hit your head on the table. All of those would be an impact that could injure the brain. The second way is just a force, and that could be even like an explosion or like whiplash, where your head is going to make a sudden movement. So there's a force and impact internally without you necessarily having an impact on something. And that can have actually injuries in two ways, because if you have like a sudden sort of ricochet movement, the front part where the brain is hitting the skull could be injured, as will when you ricochet back the back part of the brain. Because remember, inside your skull is hard and rough. Your brain is soft, like butter or tofu. So any kind of sudden movement like that could potentially really injure your brain. So what happens inside the brain then when you have either an impact or some sort of force applied to your brain? Well, in the neurons, in your brain filled with neurons, the way the neurons fire, the electricity fires, is by a chemical exchange, ions going in and out of the cell, potassium, calcium, and sodium. And so when you have an injury, all of a sudden that transportation in and out is disrupted, and that can cause people to feel nauseated and feel dizzy because it's a major disruption to that process. Something else that will happen is, so the neuron is a cell body with a long axon tail. And when you have an injury to it, it's like that tail gets stretched or kind of twisted, which can also then will damage the neuron and can then cause sudden swelling to occur within the brain. So those kinds of things, when those happen, the metabolism of the brain is greatly disrupted. And the cerebral fluid that goes in and sort of coats the brain and cushions the brain against those kind of traumas is not able then to release the waste that builds up. Not able to function properly in that way. And secondly, the brain goes into like overdrive, trying to heal itself, repair itself, and requires an enormous amount of energy, which will cause you to be very, very tired. So there's a brief overview then, some misconceptions, different types of how your brain can get injured, and then the biology of it. Next time when we're together, we'll talk about those specific symptoms that you might see. Again, prevention we want to talk about, and recovery. So until next time, bye for now.